Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GlobalLogic Cafe LinkedIn Live Conversations. Our LinkedIn Live conversations on the GlobalLogic Cafe are going to be all about careers, technology, leadership, and diversity. We welcome our speakers for today. Introducing our host for the evening, Neeru Mehta, Vice President, People Development and Human Resources at GlobalLogic India. Let's welcome Neeru with a huge round of applause.
Thank you, Ruchi. It's my pleasure to host today one of India's most interesting globalists, uh, really voted as #1 influencer on social media, author of 2 best-selling books, The Digital Tsunami, Don't Hire the Best, How to Hire for Culture and Fit, an executive coach, and the list goes on and on and on. And his latest book being Dreamers and Unicorns, How Leadership, Talent, and Culture Are the New Growth Drivers. So I'm talking about none other than, somebody is right there smiling at all of us. Abhijit, a very, very warm welcome to you. And we're really looking forward to some very interesting conversations with you today. And
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. In the subject of, transforming leadership, talent, and culture, really, in the last few quarters, the role of so-called intangibles has sort of, surfaced itself like never before. So, what's your take on, how it played out?
Well, I think thank you very much for having me here, and I want to actually start by saying that this has been a shift that has been in the making for a long time. If you really look at the organizations that are growing today, and compare the growth of the organizations, let's say, even 10 years back, except for Microsoft, none of the top 10 organizations that list would be the same. What has changed is that the number of intangible things that these organizations bring to the table. So whether it is the intellectual property, the patents, the brand, the leadership, the confidence that they are able to create, the trust that they are able to build with the customers, the employer brand, all these are things that are very difficult to measure. You can't count and compare. So anything which you can't count and compare in the traditional sense is an intangible. And this today makes up almost 80 to 85% of the value of the firm. So when you look at it, the ones which are doing well really make the most of these things like leadership, talent, and culture, which is what I chose to focus on in my book, Dreamers and Unicorns.
Yeah, that's and just for all our viewers, once again, welcome you all, and I'm seeing the numbers are pouring in. Dreamers and Unicorns is the latest book by Abhijit, and the topics there are relevant for probably everybody who is a dreamer, a unicorn, or a market shaper, right, Abhijit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you spoke about a very important point about the brand and how important the whole intangible part of the relationship and the shift. We are very used to as an individual or as a leader, as an organization, the B2C, the B2B world, that connection is very talked about.
Sure.
So this shift, and I've been reading in your book about that whole focus on trust and how it's playing out. Would you just talk about the human to human bit?
Sure. I think we have historically looked at differentiating between business to business and business to consumer. That has been the traditional model. But one of the things that I had found in the last 4 years that I've been working on this book in terms of the research, really it is more to do with the fact that it's a human to human connection. How do you sort of really have the human connection? And the first emotion that humans look for before they do anything else is really around building trust. So when you meet a stranger, the first thing you decide to do is this person going to harm me, or is this person someone I'm safe with? So it's a fight or flight kind of a thing. If the answer is neither, that, so here is a person I don't need to be aggressive with, and I don't need to run away from this person, that is when you experience the first emotion, which is that, okay, I can trust this person. And that is going to be so foundational to all the businesses as well as to individuals, so that's really the importance. And when you think about the big shift that has happened, the workplace has moved from being outside of our home and it has moved absolutely inside. So we are now connected to the world of work only in an intangible fashion, which is through our devices and the internet connections. Once again, therefore, the importance of building our trust with our team members, with our managers, with our peers, as well as the customers. So that is really one of the first things that I feel we need to be building.
Yeah, trust being the foundation. And I also read something about the vulnerability that that again surfaced out very, very strongly. Again, it generally surfaces out in all crisis times, but I read about that. So can you just share about how it played out in the last few quarters, and how leaders need to see that as maybe as a strength?
Yeah. So, again, one of the interesting dimensions is that the world of work is actually in many ways becoming a polar opposite of what we have been trained in and gotten used to. So one big example of that is this whole element of vulnerability. Because, when you think about the older model of the leader, this is a leader where everybody is fuzzy. This leader says, I know where to go. And then, that's been the model of leadership. Today, unfortunately, on any question that you ask, when can we get back to work? When is the vaccine going to be there? Is everyone going to do it? Is the economy going to recover? Is our sector going to work? None of the questions can anyone answer, despite the fact that you have a lot of the data that we've already gathered about this. So really, you're looking at a scenario when the leaders are in no way, in terms of information, very different from the followers. So this is a time for the leaders to say, I don't know, we'll need to explore this together. And that actually requires a lot of vulnerability to be able to stand up and say, I really don't know. Because the reality is that nobody knows any better. If the heads of the states, if the world over people are not able to sort of state that, then in which case, how can the leader of a small business or anything of that sort do that? So we are back to that whole question that I started with by talking about the importance of trust. Because for example, even if you have the vaccine, to be able to trust and say, this vaccine is safe for me, it's safe for my kid, it's safe for my parents, it's safe for my spouse. I mean, those are some of the questions each individual human being, the 8 billion people on this planet will have to address it for themselves. So I think we are going to be in a scenario where the element of trust is going to come up in a much, much, much larger way than it has ever been before. So that's really the role of vulnerability, to be able to, because if you are not vulnerable, you are not going to be able to build trust. Imagine if you ask this question, I say, I'm going to tell you what to do. I know what is the right answer. You will never trust me, because the reality is that you are Googling up the answer, or you're listening to some of the WhatsApp videos, and so am I. So, and with the clutter of fake news and everything, vulnerability is a very important fact that's going to come in front.
Yeah, vulnerability being being of course one of the cornerstones as for leaders to deal with the tuna environment. I'm using the words.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think is the kind of mindset shift that needs to happen? And somewhere we feel we're all going digital. We are all sort of the whole workforce, workplace equilibrium that you talk about. How does that need to shift? And how does that mindset change, can help make that shift?
Sure. So I think when you look at, I'll just explain in a minute. When you think about the world of work, there are three components that really have to work in equilibrium. The way we work, so obviously when you work in the fields, agriculture, the kind of work that you do with, say, implements and the seeds and all of that requires a certain kind of a skill, which is the worker. So you need a certain kind of a worker. And that in turn creates the kind of norms that are there, that this is when you get up in the morning, this is when you go to work, this is when you come back, all those norms of the workplace. So worker and workplaces actually always go together. When you think about what actually happens in when there is a shift, so the moment you think about mass production, you are looking at a completely different way of working. So it's not just, you're really scaling it up identical products done at scale. You need a different kind of a worker, and then you need a different workplace. The factory needs to work in shifts. You need shift supervisors, etc. Now you're in a scenario where work has changed. We are using, technology to communicate like this instead of being in an auditorium. Yeah, we are sort of, you are in your home, I'm in my home, and we are really sort of creating something like that, right? And we are simulating the equivalent of, let's say, a conference or something to that effect. The second thing that's happening is the worker who is good in one of those methods is not necessarily good in the other one. What it means is the teachers who are absolutely phenomenal, let's say in teaching a class in the real environment in college or school or something, are not necessarily the ones who have been really fabulous when it comes to the virtual place. And the other way around, there are people who were nobodies in this virtual place suddenly have become superstars. So that's the new skill that is required that creates that. And the combination of work and worker means that the workplaces need to be run with a different set of policies. When you look at that, the same thing is going to happen even when the vaccine comes in, or as we are looking at it, the organizations are having to do with everything which is hybrid. So it is, some people are working in the office now, some of them are back, some of them are working from home, some of them are working from their hometown, and some of them are working in other locations, which is neither home nor hometown. Yeah. So to be able to, the moment you are thinking about really working in a boundaryless world, you have to really rethink a number of things. So how are you going to get people back into the workplace? Is it going to be by some kind of a workspace definition that you'll get everybody in on the same day, or are you going to be on the same time zone? Because the time which is convenient to you may be inconvenient to some person in the team. So those are some of the things that we have never actually had to worry about, because everybody went into work, let's say at 9 o'clock in the morning, everybody was there. We didn't ever have to deal with this. That is the challenge we are having to work with today.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very interesting bit, because see, and you rightly said, the answer to many questions is now, I don't know, but we're working towards it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There is always work in progress, and the shift that, I think everything is shifting.
Yes.
So this is very interesting piece that I was reading about the whole S curves in life, S curves in careers, and how do individuals, and a lot of our viewers are engineers over here, or working across different roles. How do they need to really see their growth and carve it out? Instead of just seeing a straight line up, what are the different points of inflection, and what's the best way to view that?
So when you think about traditionally when we've looked at careers, when we define it as careers, we always think about it as either a straight line that historically what used to happen is you joined one organization and then you sort of retired from that one organization. That's no longer valid. You join one organization and you have to switch jobs. Especially in the in the corporate world that we are talking about, this is a very common process. And the reason for that is the lifespan of organizations has shrunk, and human beings are actually living longer and longer. So there is a gap between even if you wanted to, the organizations are probably not going to survive that long. At least most of the organizations are not going to be. That number has come down to about 20 years, which means if you are working longer than 20 years, which if you start work, let's say at 20, and in 20 years you are barely 40, you've got a lot of time ahead of you to be working, then you have to switch either the organization or the industry or the kind of jobs. The shelf life of skills is now barely 2.5 years, depending on who you ask. So when you think about the combination of these three things, that organizations are living shorter, human beings are living longer, skills are really down to about 2.5 years, you are having to look at a lot of change that is going to come in, which means human beings, as they grow from, let's say, an initial phase in the organization, they start their career, they have to then start building their skills. As they are on that rise, at the time when they are most successful, they are really doing well, that is also the time they have to really move to the next S curve. Because otherwise, most people, when they go from dreamer to unicorn, they are on the growth curve. And then they know that they are going to become market shapers. They're going to be at the top of the professions. But in many cases, the profession changes, right? When I started my career, there was no such job called Chief Learning Officer, which was the last piece of employment that I did. So it was a completely new job that came up. It was a new opportunity, new kind of a role. I had never worked in many of those sectors. So at every point of time, you are having to change the combination of things that you are doing, and that is really going to drive the shift of the S curve as I've described it. So you visualize the shift from slowly building your skills, you sharpen the growth curve, and then you kind of plateau out. So that is the real shift of the your skills that is causing the S curve shift. So you have to jump the S curve before you're forced to, because your
Okay.
industry may go out of business, your skills may go out of business. The industry doesn't need your kind of so many people like you anymore. There can be many reasons.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, and it'll also be further interesting to figure out where are you on the S curve today. For people to know, understand that better, and make decisions appropriately, right?
Yeah. So one way to understand that is that you would say, if I would say that when you're really struggling to learn the skills, you are in the initial phase. So you're in the dreamer phase. You're trying to figure out your product market fit. How good are you in that world? Yeah. So that's the first phase. The second phase is actually where you figured it out, and you are very successful. You get your promotions. You are sort of really thriving in that atmosphere. And then you come to the market shaper phase of your career, which is when you are the head of the function, you're leading teams, you're leading initiatives. So you're at that place. I think the best thing to really start thinking about is, as you start to hit the growth path, you are becoming from dreamer to unicorn. That is a very vital stage where you really have to now start building your skills so that you jump to the next phase. So that, I think, is the tough thing to do, because it's very tempting not to do anything about it. You stopped struggling, and you don't want to go back and start learning things all over again. So I think that's the challenge, which is how a lot of people suddenly realize that they become redundant.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And if I was just to like sort of paraphrase what you said, it's like being in your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
Doing
Yes.
extremely well in your comfort zone, and unless there is a inside or an outside force, people tend to plateau, right?
Yes. Comfort zone is really the sign. The moment you think, in India, we often use this phrase, okay, now it's time for you to settle down. Yeah. When you
Yeah.
you found the job, and things are going well, people say now you must settle down. That is probably the first warning bell that should come to you. Okay, now you figured it out, now you time to settle down. It's actually the time not to settle down.
Yeah, so for all our viewers, and especially people out there, just when you feel settled is the time you need to get into the dreaming phase again, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that brings me to this very interesting topic. And inside the organizations that I've worked with, or if I talk about GlobalLogic, we've been talking a lot about think about crisscrosses, think about what you can do while you're doing what you're doing, how you can get upskilled, cross-skilled, rather than what gets me to just the next level. And this whole concept of careers 3.0, think skills, not role, it
Yeah.
really resonated very well on that thought. So I just really want to know, how do you really encourage people to move in that direction, and how do organizations need to set up the ecosystem so that all this starts to happen automatically? So just if you can share those thoughts.
Yeah. So, when you think about skills, not roles, it means that, when you decode your own current role in the organization, and you kind of say that, what are the skills that I need? I have skills of analyzing information. I have skills of influencing people. I need to work with some people outside, some people in other departments. You kind of, pick up those kind of different elements of the job. And then you kind of say that what skills does it need? It needs the skills. Let's say there are some soft skills, there are some hard skills. You segregate that. And the hard skills, of course, the thing is they're quick to build. So it takes very little time to build your hard skills. So if you didn't know quadratic equation, somebody could teach you and you could learn it right away. Yeah, so it's easy to learn. But then it also becomes obsolete equally quickly. So your hard skills, really go zigzag, peaks and curves, peaks and valleys. So that's your hard skills. When it comes to the soft skills, you are really talking about a scenario where it's a very slow grind and it builds up. So, for example, if you start to manage people, it takes a long time before you really get good at it, and you get good at, let's say, managing a team of 3 people. Then suddenly you realize when you manage maybe 10 people or 5 people, it becomes very different. So the whole process of soft skills is a constant struggle because you never really, really reach some kind of a perfection in that. It's always something where you begin to realize more levels of complexity. So that is how you have to start thinking about the skills that you're using today and the skills that you want to build for the future. So at any given point of time, ask yourself, what hard skills will I need? What soft skills will I need? And sometimes I think it's also things that you need to build on the side just to keep your learning muscle going. So one of the things I did, for example, during the lockdown last year, besides of course writing the book, which took up a lot of time, I spent time, getting myself certified as an independent director. It meant attending the classes. It meant taking an exam. It meant, really learning about subjects I had no clue about, and
Mhm.
understanding the law which goes into it. And that was really a fabulous thing. Once that got over, I joined a course on, learning how to do video editing, learning how to, learn Photoshop. So I learned a whole bunch of
There's an interesting story out there about the editing. I would love it if you can share it with the viewers.
yeah. So,
How it
I,
really.
I thought that there's so much of our world which is going digital, and I enjoy doing that. So I kind of started. I have always been extremely comfortable writing, but never comfortable in on camera, on video. It's something I've always shied away from. And I kind of thought that, okay, you know what, I'm going to just teach myself how to do this better. So I learned how to sort of do this. I learned to take this editing software, learned how to create videos, mixing tracks, putting the music, mixing the visuals, putting the logos, all those kind of things. I learned how to do that on my own, because it's always easy to outsource it. But the thing is, I would never learn it myself, so this is the skill that I picked up. So for me, 2020 was really a great opportunity for me to build that skill. So yeah, and now, so when I was doing that class, I was clearly the oldest guy in the class. Even the person who was teaching was much younger. And everybody asked this one question: "You're not applying for a job. What are you going to do with this?" So I said, "No, I just want to learn it." And they said, "Sure. Why do you want to learn it?" Because everybody thinks of learning having an end goal. Where am I going to use it? But for me, if you don't start learning just because you want to learn it, that's a muscle that takes a long time to build. And in the initial days, oh my God, I really struggled with that, because I thought I have to drop out because it was embarrassing. Everybody got it except me. And then I stayed the course, and then obviously then your learning curve sort of takes on. And then, so I realized that I had not done something rigorous for a long time. So it was a sobering, realization, and it was great that I stuck to it. I didn't give up. So that was great.
No, that's a very, very interesting story. And I'm sure, there's a sort of a learning in the story as well. There's no bar, and the very fact, and you were speaking about the whole career span that's become so long.
Yeah.
What would how would you survive if you're not a learner? So
And if you're not having fun, and the only way you have fun is you're picking up a skill, you're beginning to, you're learning to skate, you obviously fumble, you fall, you hurt yourself, and then there comes a point of time you can really zip across. So learning the skill is really like, that whole process of being really wobbly initially, and which is where most people give up. But that's the whole game, that never give up when you're wobbly. It means that you're very close to, picking up the skill, and, so the dreamer phase is that wobbly phase. And the fun part is that unicorn phase when you zip through and you can do that. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
yeah, I can definitely hear that and see that. Yeah, so I just want was reading through, and about really the whole shift from viewing jobs as something permanent, something that not just gets your home running but also gets you married. If you look at the olden times and how it was so important to know which company you're working for, and nobody thought about the skills and the roles and the jobs. But from there to the shift, which is, jobs being temporary assignments, and how you keep on sort of reinventing yourself, and that focus being the center point for a learner. Another piece, how does one really become a purple squirrel? And I want you to solve that riddle.
So first you have to sort of, just a quick line that purple squirrel is, a term a lot of recruiters use, which is that, it's a rare combination of skills, it's a rare combination of hard skills and soft skills. And it's almost like, imagine that if you had to go looking for a purple squirrel, you really have to look really hard, and maybe there is one, maybe there isn't. It is such a unique combination. So I think when you become a purple squirrel, you become a niche player. You are able to actually create a unique combination of skills, which then creates an opportunity for you, which is something that where there is no competition, because eventually the purpose of all competition is to eliminate the other competitors, right? And the only person who eliminates those competitors is the purple squirrel, because there's no other purple squirrel. So I think that's how it is.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And how the adjacent skills, or the leaps as you call it, help achieve that. If you that's something again which is really shaping the learning journey in the organizations as well.
So which today in organizations such as yours, it becomes very easy to achieve, because if you're, let's say, if you've always done talent acquisition, to do a stint, let's say, in compensation, that's an adjacent skill. But when you do, let's say, a stint in marketing, that's a leap. So that's a leap skill. So you have to build a combination of adjacent skills and leap skills in order to sort of create a really powerful career strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was really, very, very intrigued when I was reading about this purple squirrel piece. And I was like, how many purple squirrels are we hunting at any given point in time? And, I would then remember those discussions with TAG, and, you have all these combinations that sometimes get asked for,
Yeah, and I think that's the other interesting possibility. The more kind of combinations that you have, the more is the purple color which is sort of coming up with you. And that, I think, is really what gets people going. So yes, I think it's a phenomenal way to shape your own career. You take charge of it and shape it. So
yeah, no, that's it. I think there's a lot for the listeners over here. Really, skill being the currency, how you can really be the niche player. And of course, video editing, I wouldn't say everyone can learn. It really takes a lot of effort to do that.
No, I'm by no means alluding to the fact that that I am very good at it. No, not at all. I mean, I'm very clumsy. You see my videos, you realize that I'm a learner, but I'm not going to give up. That's the only thing. And I've always thought that if I can't do something, then I kind of jump straight into that pool and then give it a shot. Obviously, in the initial phases, I make an ass of myself. So even when I started doing the LinkedIn lives, which I do, it was very hard for me, because I am like really, really super conscious. But now I've become a lot more comfortable with it. I am able to sort of bring in other people. I just think that initial phase is very daunting, because so I think that's the tough part to really stay with.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a very, very good perspective to take from this conversation. Now, I'll come back to the S curves, because that's something again that relates very well to the whole careers 3.0, and how change is the only constant at the workplace. And really, what kind of shifts, or you've spoken about exponential growth and the kind of balancing that needs to happen. So, if you can just talk a little about that, Abhijit.
Yeah. So when you sort of really start to think about what creates exponential growth, I think we are really talking about having a growth path which is disproportionately larger. So exponential is obviously when you sort of look at how much you can cover, instead of going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you were to go 1, 2, 4, 8, and you are doubling every time, pretty much like the way the coronavirus, started with just one case, or then suddenly we heard, okay, there are 30 cases. In the book, I have actually given some of those early numbers. When you look at the early numbers, it just seemed very manageable. But then there was a point of time where it just really shot up. So I think that's the exponential part of it. The way you sort of do that is you constantly stay at the cutting edge of your own career, and then you build a sort of a combination of a number of things on the side, the skills on the side, the soft skills, your ability. For example, if you are there's a question that when you go for a startup, what are some of the things to keep in mind? I think for me, if I were to take that, I am trying to answer the question raised by Ruchi, where it's a good question. When I started being an entrepreneur and starting my own thing, I had to really understand finance, the whole concept of cash flow, because as an employee, you never worry about it because, on the first of the month, you get that SMS and that, okay, the salary is credited and you are a happy bunny. But when you really start working, you realize working capital can make or break your business. So I became more conscious about that. You kind of also understand the importance of things like building a brand. You understand the importance of keeping time for yourself. How do you, even if you could work 30 days a month, it's a great idea not to do that and to actually start to reduce the amount of time, because so that you are able to upskill yourself in real time. These are some of the shifts you never think about as as an employee, because your employer says, okay, now tomorrow you go for a 5-day program. As a startup person, you have to worry about your own skills. So those are some of the things which is really tough, when you get started. I hope that answered this question, Ruchi. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and thanks, Abhijit, for really sharing that tip, because I feel this pretty much at times the message that we share, even as part of an organizational message to employees, is you really own your careers, and organization creates the ecosystem, but this is your insurance. Learning is your insurance on your career. So if
and this is not not limited to any one or two functions. I mean, for example, one of the questions that comes up often is if there are people in engineering and technology, can they really switch? The answer is yes. I mean, today we are actually living in the golden age where anything to anything is possible. I mean, you have people who have given up thriving careers and have become, let's say, in the performing arts, they become dancers, full-time dancers, or full-time stand-up comedians, or they become full-time artists. I know so many examples. I've talked about, the one of the guys who's a junior of mine from my B school. He's a full-time musician. So, these kind of things are absolutely possible. Not just and you're talking about a leap, but, if you're thinking about shifts, you as an engineer, you can learn a different part of the job. You've always done, let's say, coding. Now you kind of sort of get into design, maybe go for a course in UX design and sort of learn that. And maybe through a course, maybe you kind of learn from somebody as an apprentice to that person. There are multiple ways to change jobs and careers. Today, we are in that golden age where anything is possible. So the answer to every such question is yes, of course you can. I mean, Elon Musk taught himself how to build rockets and has got, SpaceX as a company. What better example can I give you about that? All the 4 companies that he's doing, none of them has he ever studied formally. And he's built companies on that, and which now are, so obviously he's now the richest man in the world, at least for a short while he was, but now he will continue to be there. Those are the options that never existed before. So we are in that golden time.
Golden age it is actually. And absolutely, when we spoke about careers being, the whole concept of long-term careers, I will join this organization and retire after X years, and I know this white thing very well because I've done it for 50 long years, is gone. And therefore...
That means, see, the move from market shaper to incumbent is a very short drop, and even as a unicorn, you find that just as out of the thousands of dreamers, only one becomes a unicorn. In the same way, out of 1,000 unicorns, only one becomes a market shaper. So when you look at that combination, the rest become incumbents or they just disappear. So I think the reasons are pretty similar, except for the fact that we all know what's to be done, but we don't necessarily always do it. There's a great question which is there. I'm just sort of reading that question, that morale building in big teams favoritism, standing out, and identity crisis. How do we handle many of these? Okay, I'm going to. Neeru, do you want to share your ideas, and then I can also pitch in my two penny bit? What are some of the things that in big teams, how do you build morale? What are some of the things that you would say?
So I think one of the big pieces that sort of has played out very well or worked, in such large setups is, really making sure that everybody is very, very glued on the purpose. When there is the purpose, working as a glue, people do understand the larger picture and the vision, and then work backwards from there rather than, thinking what's there, what just, on their own bit. That automatically, it gets a sense of sort of the motivation levels go up. And we've seen that if we were to just see, I know I promised myself I'm not going to talk about COVID here. but I'm really going to speak. It has shown itself, because this whole pandemic gave a purpose to the organizations. When we were transitioning, the whole organization, no matter what size, the largest to the smallest ones, came together and transitioned successfully. And the morale levels, really, of course, outside of some of the things that organizations had to do, it went up, because the purpose, at least when I speak about my organization, the purpose stood large and clear for teams. So I feel that leaders need to really set the purpose right, make sure people do understand the path that's leading up to there. It's almost half the job done.
Yes, yeah. I would also think that if you think about adversity, actually it brings people together. I mean, one of the reasons why the teams which go mountaineering together, I mean, they all form really deep bonds. Or sports is a great example. When you pay for a team, even the ones who lose actually come back feeling really close to each other, because you shared adversity. So that's a great moment, actually, to leverage adversity to bring the people together around a common sense of purpose. And also in terms of the identity, I think, people, their identity is very often limited to a particular role or a job, so therefore they kind of would say that my identity is I'm this kind of a person. But the more adjacent skills you build, the wider are the choices in which your identity rests. It's really like saying that when you hang a picture, if you or you put up a piece of paper on the wall, you stick it with just one piece of sellotape. Then in which case that's your identity, and it hangs from just one piece. But suppose you have many other things, that identity is really much sharper. So that's how I would answer the question. I hope I've been able to answer the question, from coming from some of you. I can see that in the question.
A very interesting question, Abhijit, that I would read out. Is Abhijit Bhaduri a dreamer or a unicorn? So, definitely you're not an incumbent. We all know that. So, what's where are you at this point in time?
So, I think in the it is a tough one, and it's not out of any sense of modesty, but I think there are some skills where one has got a little more proficiency than, let's say, a dreamer. But in many places I'm a dreamer, and in some places, very few places, I have a little degree of proficiency. So it's probably a combination, but overall, if you were to really look at it, I really enjoy doing new things. I really enjoy trying out different things. So in that sense, I would say I'm more of a novice in multiple places. I enjoy being a novice, actually. So I think in that sense, that's the answer. It probably fits in closer to that.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting, because I mean, coming from you, of course, I won't rule out modesty for sure. So
No, it's not. I mean, it's just that I'm not necessarily great in everything. Maybe some skills I have done it a little more. I have, maybe I've drawn a little more than what an average person does. So maybe a little bit of that. But then there are so many things. There are people who've drawn for years together who are really, or much shorter spans than I have, and they're really good at it. So it's a relative process, depends who you're comparing myself to. So I think I would sort of go with that.
Yeah, no, interesting. So another, I think it's a very, we're getting some very deep questions, and it's nice to see that with the flow that we are in. Somebody's asking that I can understand companies wanting their employees to know many things, but is it worthwhile being jack of all trades versus learning few things well?
Yeah,
So
that's a great question you asked. Thank you for that. I think no, one is not talking about being a jack of all trades, but I think the ability to be agile and sort of, so you have one deep skill. So in my case, let's say, I started off by saying that, okay, I'm going to pursue my career in human resources. And then over a span of time, as one part of that, I found that I really wanted to go deep into this whole area of learning and development and sort of really look at that. And then I kind of said that, okay, let me try and get the experience of working across different sectors. And when you do that, you begin to see where you can apply it and where you don't. So I think for each skill, I would say build depth in the skill, but you build a different context in which you can apply that particular skill. So I would look at it like that. And as you start to do that, focus on building some of the softer skills. So for example, let's say now, for instance, one of the skills everybody can do well to build is, how do you learn to communicate better virtually? Very simple thing like, having a conversation like this, having your team meetings online. How do you keep your team engaged? That's a skill. Nobody's learned it before consciously, but, learning about that. So I think it's that combination that I would really talk about as a constant thing. Jack of all trades has the connotation that you're not good in anything. No, you are probably learning many things, but you are also reasonably proficient in a few of them.
Yeah. And I would just add some, a little bit to this is that, you have to see that, at any point in time, what are you doing? Are you doing many things, or you have your 1, 2, 3 very clear? Right. So it's also about prioritization at a given point in time. You should not be learning like 5 or 6 certifications and, not really being able to complete any, or, so I think you'll have to really decide for yourself, that piece.
Yeah, signing up and not completing doesn't either get you the skill or the thing, So I mean, I think being able to complete things and add that to your repertoire, whether you use it. So I think, Neeru, I'm going to go back to that previous question and take a little bit of a caveat on that. I would actually land up saying that, if you are able to, create a skill, you add the skill, regardless of whether it is going to be used immediately or not. So I kind of think, many of the skills which I did at one point of time, I sort of learned how to, do something. It may not have been used in that particular role immediately, but at some point of time, I've found a way to use that, so I think that's really the whole point that today, for example, a lot of the work that I do on LinkedIn, I enjoy writing. I've just brought my professional skill of learning and development, added my skill of writing. I illustrate my own drawings, and I, put my own voiceover videos, etc. And so I'm constantly merging all of them into shaping that one skill, which is how do I become more effective on a larger platform. So I've tried multiple formats. So I have a newsletter, which on LinkedIn, I do that. I mean, that's, one format. Then I do single posts. Then I do LinkedIn Lives. So I'm with that one skill, I'm trying to build many other side pieces. So it's that whole example of holding up the picture with many pieces of sellotape. I think that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and making it stronger. Yeah, sticking it so it lasts.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we people are really intrigued. Huh? Corporate world for so many years, and now an entrepreneur, a dreamer, a consultant, columnist, speaker. How are you managing so many interesting things?
No, I think all of us manage multiple things. I think sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for all the things that we do. I mean, for a number of people who've been managing home and work, children, aging parents, I mean, they're just as, just as hard to do. So I think, I mean, some of the things that I do are in mass media, so they get a little bit more attention. But I don't think that it's in any way tougher or more creditable to do that than, let's say, somebody who's managing their career and managing the kids' education and running a home is just as complex. And some of us, have been doing that effortlessly as unsung heroes. So I think sometimes I feel I get more credit than I deserve, because there are so many people who are doing far many more things. Actually, they're so I have just pursued different ideas that I have. I've tried it out, and I think the only difference is I stick to it until I reach a certain level of proficiency, because I believe that, at the start of, before you build your proficiency, you don't really know whether you enjoy it or not. I mean, when you learn to drive on day one, you're obviously not going to enjoy driving, because you're going to be petrified. You're going to be scared. And I was so scared that I'm going to bang into something. It's that. So I think the opportunity to do something well, it comes in, and you enjoy it when you start to build the skill. So you go from that dreamer phase past to the unicorn phase. That's when you really start to enjoy it. That's when you kind of think that, okay, now you can decide. And chances are that you will start enjoying what you've built that proficiency in. So, which is why, as I've done that, that's really how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Inch deep, or rather, inch wide, mile deep, right?
Yeah. But do multiple contexts, and then keep adding the skills. It's really like juggling. You start by juggling, one or two balls in the air, and then you kind of say that, okay, the jugglers are able to juggle a knife and a ball and a bottle and a this, and without really doing it. So many bartenders do it. So, it's a question of anything that you are able to do well, which people get dazzled by, has had a lot of years of practice, a lot of hours of practice. So I think that.
Yeah. So for the viewers, and I really want to, like, in every answer, I want them to have their takeaways. Really, it takes a lot behind it. Even when you see something happening, or somebody multitasking, I think everybody's doing that. So of course, it takes a lot to get to that level of proficiency. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And we are flooded with questions. There's lots, and of course, I want to say that we can be reached out later also to answer your questions. You can write in, but maybe we can take a couple of questions, especially for the leaders. There are these questions, and Abhijit, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
What are your 1, 2, and 3 priorities as a leader or professional?
Whoa. I would actually say that, as a leader of an organization, I think one of the first things to do is to be able to build the right kind of a team for the job, and which often means going beyond the resume. So one of the things that really works is if you're able to know the people beyond what is written on their resume, to understand what are their motivators. So all the intangible things that I spoke about, so what are their motivators? What do they care about? What are they passionate about? What are their dreams? What would they see for themselves? And then kind of really say that, can we use the work to further their dreams? So if the people who are there, the professional team that is there with you, how can you make them better? So I think that's, for me, one of the big things that I always try to look at, that how do I build the skills of the people, so that if they have spent a year with me, they should become, what should they know? What should they feel? What should they do? So, in some sense, it's a know, feel, do kind of a combination that, as a leader, I would say, what should my team know? So that's this training that you would build for them. What should they feel? They should feel motivated. They should feel inspired. They should feel empowered, whatever you want them to feel. What are the kind of things they should be doing, so that, it really deepens their success probability? That's really, for me, is the, as I would sort of look at the 3 pieces.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think there's a lot to, it just sort of, I could see the phase that you spoke about and relate to, all that you put in as your priorities. So thank you for sharing that. And so from my end, I think when I look at my role as a leader, or in an organization, or as a HR professional, I think at this point in time, and priorities are sometimes always the point in time pieces, is really as as an HR leader for an organization, it's really been about, or rather, even right now, it is about ensuring that there is a good level of motivation and focus on employee wellness.
Ah,
That's sort of, and it's been a center stage theme through this crisis, and it gave me, and this is more a personal story than just being a leader in an organization, of really we've been talking about empathy for many years, but this was the this crisis gave the opportunity to really be that every day, every single day. One had the opportunity to be that person who could be empathetic, who could really help others, also also help other leaders do the same. So I think that is where I saw a lot of at least focus and priority from my end. The second piece was, as this goes through for myself as well as the employees, it's how do we shape the careers, or how do we make sure people understand. And Abhijit, this conversation again is in that direction, an effort to make sure that there is a larger picture of the journey that people understand. Yeah, last but not
absolutely. I mean,
least,
so that no feel do, you're talking about empathy is the feel part of it. Yeah. And I totally agree. I mean, it's just such a awesome thing for an organization to really care about, mental health, building empathy for the, because I think most people have really done their work under extremely demanding conditions. And it speaks volumes for the human race, that how well we have been able to with that setback. It's like a wall hitting us, and
yeah.
still everybody has sort of done that. It's just I have the deepest admiration for the human resilience process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this crisis is always a opportunity in hindsight. So how you could really play it out and how you could really be the best version of yourself. I think everybody got that opportunity. So on that note, I just want to I hope we still have a couple of minutes. So I'll just sort of give a short summary for everyone. As I was noting it down. So continue the focus on your growth and your learning with the tips that we shared today. So careers is a series of inflection points. It's a series of S curves. It's a series of being a dreamer, turning a unicorn, turning and staying there, becoming a market shaper, and really always being whenever you feel settled, whenever you feel comforted, step out of that zone. Having a learning mindset, building proficiencies, focus on the soft skills. They take a longer time to really get skilled at. And last but not the least, don't forget the edge to edge connection, because I think that's what makes the biggest difference in the life journeys as well as career journeys. So on that note, a big thank you to you. And I
Neeru,
think
I'm just impressed about how well you've summarized all my blabbering over as an hour. Summarized so beautifully. I mean, what a skill that is. That's incredible. Thank you very much. I mean, that was really brilliant the way you sort of did it. Thank you very much.
so. Thanks everyone. And on that note, we can be reached out for any further questions if there are, on our LinkedIn IDs or Twitter. And I think Abhijit, you are active on all the forums. So yes, people do reach out to us. And happy career journeys to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate your having me here, Neeru, and GlobalLogic. Thank you very much for being there. I just want to end by saying that this is an ongoing process. Career is our journey through life, and wish you all the very best, not just in the work that you do, but your life in general. So thank you so much for listening. Much appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.